Hi everybody. Today I'm going to be critiquing an article forwarded to me by a self-described MRA sympathiser and anti-feminist. I suppose if there's a difference between an MRA sympathiser and an MRA, I suppose a sympathiser is just someone who doesn't really get involved with the movement, but kind of likes it. Probably gives the thumbs up to videos about it and stuff like that. The guy who forwarded me this article, he's a British atheist, and there should be one problem I've got with British atheists, and bear in mind I am a British atheist. A lot of them online try to sort of be a bit like American atheists. They try and imply that they're being oppressed by religious oppression, and that they are oh so intellectual and clever because they've seen through the bullshit that is religion. Now, I'm not saying religious fundamentalism doesn't exist in the UK, but it is far, far, far less common than it is in America. And as such, I'm not really willing to consider someone to be highly clever, to be highly intelligent, just because they're an atheist. Because this guy, who looks like he's in his 20s, possibly late teens or 20s, he almost certainly had a non-religious, or at least very lightly religious upbringing. He will have sung some hymns and heard some Bible stories in school, because that's what we do over here. We don't have separation of church and state. But the kind of Christianity we teach in primary schools and to a certain extent in high schools over here is so heavily watered down that it's just doesn't even compare to hillbilly fundamentalism. So while I accept that if you've been raised in an aggressively religious environment, an aggressively fundamentalist religious environment, that it takes a definite amount of intelligence to claw your way out of that, and I do applaud people for figuring out that religion is bullshit. If you've actually had this indoctrinated into your brain, if you've been told that you're going to burn in hell if you don't agree with this stuff from a very early age, it must take a hell of a lot of common sense and a hell of a lot of intelligence to figure your way out of that. I really don't think that's the case with most British atheists, though. There are some exceptions, but for the most part it's pretty easy to figure out God isn't real, because they don't make God sound anything like scary enough to warp our rationality particularly. So I'm not really willing to accept this guy as some sort of intellectual, although I get the impression he seems to think he is. I should have twigged that he was an MRA sympathiser or anti-feminist, whatever you want to call it, because he brought up Atheism Plus in the comment section of a video that had absolutely nothing to do with Atheism Plus or anything. And people who do that are usually the next thing they're going to do is start slagging off feminism. It's their way of sort of trying to get from atheism to feminism so they can have a good old bitch about feminism. But anyway, he forwards me this article by Joshua Kennan. And it's entitled "The Warren Farrell Protest at the University of Toronto, an example of how not to behave if you want to be successful in life." Okay, anyone who doesn't know what that was, basically Warren Farrell, who is an asshole, was giving a talk at the University of Toronto, and there was a protest. Some feminists showed up and protested at it. And it's not that surprising that they did, because Warren Farrell is a significant figure in the men's movement. And I'm just going to read some sections of this here. "On this site we strive to practice the philosophy of John Stuart Mill, who would eagerly read every side of an argument because he wanted to see that no scattered particles of important truth are buried and lost in the ruins of exploded error. That means we each have a fundamental moral duty to openly fight against any censorship or suppression of ideas, regardless of if we think those ideas are good or not." Right, I'll come back to that in a minute. He sort of goes over that again later. I'll come back to that. "This goes hand in hand with the rule Charlie Munger constantly reminds us to follow. Our greatest duty is to attack our own best cherished ideas as ruthlessly and as intellectually as we can. Those ideas that stand up to the attack will have proven themselves even more valuable, while those that fail improve our cognition because we no longer believe falsehoods. It is a win-win situation that can only make your life better in the long run if you're willing to give up the security and comfort of false dogma." Okay. Tonight I'm going to share a counter-example with you. The way these protesters are behaving is exactly the opposite of how you should strive to live your life. If someone wants to promote an idea, you don't block the doors and keep people out. Doing so only indicates you fear what they say. Instead, you throw open the doors, turn on the spotlights, turn up the microphone, and then invite the informed to debate, discuss, evaluate, weigh, measure, and work out whether there is truth in the idea. You do not demonise your opponent. You don't attack him or her as a person. It's about the ideas. Good people can have terrible ideas, and bad people can have excellent ideas. To think otherwise is to suffer from the halo and horns effect mental model and the mere association mental model. Right, I want to chip in here. There is a reason why people are pissed off that Warren Farrell is giving a talk at Toronto University, and it really doesn't have anything to do with censorship. I'd be annoyed as well. Now what he said here, I'll just read it again. He said, throw open the doors, turn on the spotlight, turn up the microphone, and invite the informed to debate, discuss, evaluate, weigh, measure, and work out whether there is truth in the idea. That's already been done. What Warren Farrell is promoting is demonstrable bullshit. It's already been proven. That this is the problem people have. It's not that someone has a differing view to them, it's that that view has already been proven to be bullshit. And an academic institution should not be approving of that, should not be giving its seal of approval to that. By having someone like this speak at an academic institution, it gives them an air of plausibility that they don't really have. It implies that there's something actually relevant about what they're trying to say. That's the point. It's the same as that we don't invite people like Ray Comfort to give talks at scientific institutions. We don't do that. We don't say, well, let's hear his side of it as well. His side of it is built upon bullshit. That's why we don't do that. We don't have, people like Tommy Robinson giving talks at academic institutions, because it's hate speech. It's bigoted, demonstrably false bullshit. And that's what Warren Farrell's doing. It is the men's movement, in inverted commas, this men's rights movement is a hate group, or it's a group of hate groups, and it's hate speech. This is why people are angry. They're angry that someone who really shouldn't be speaking at an academic institution is. Now, I know Warren Farrell does have a doctorate, but that does not automatically mean everything he says has some sort of academic value. What he has written in his book is garbage. It is vile, hate-ridden garbage. We don't just invite anyone to speak at academic institutions. We let everyone have their say. Anyone can write their own blog if they want. They can put their own videos on YouTube or whatever, so long as they don't violate terms of service. People can have their say, but we don't automatically let everyone speak at an academic institution. Can you imagine how ridiculous that would be if everyone's opinions had to be hosted at academic institutions? Fucking ridiculous. If we carry on here, if you stray from that willingness to consider all evidence, again it's not evidence, right, especially evidence that is counter to your core beliefs, you are setting yourself up for foolishness. You will see the world how you think it is and not how it actually is. That's not ideal. To use an example we've discussed in the past, it is this mental tragedy that explains how you get entire civilizations of people who will murder their neighbours as heretics for daring to question the barbaric practice of sacrificing newborn infants to a harvest god so the wheat grows a little higher. What a ridiculous analogy. So not letting a hate monger, a misogynistic, bigoted hate monger, speak as an academic institution will lead to us sacrificing newborn infants to harvest gods so the wheat will grow higher. I mean, what a ridiculous connection you've made there. What a ridiculous thing to say. Prepare yourself. Here are the protesters at the University of Toronto late last month. This is the full, non-edited video of a group of students that blocked other students from hearing an on-campus speaker named Warren Farrell, best-selling author of The Myth of Male Power. I almost get the impression he's trying to pretend he doesn't really know who Warren Farrell is. Named Warren Farrell, yeah. Best-selling author of The Myth of Male Power, which suggests he does know who this is. Update: the protesters are trying to get YouTube to remove the video. It may disappear soon. It's actually still up. I'll put a link in the description to all of this. It says, wait until about halfway through the video. It's short, less than 5 minutes. The protesters have no interest in hearing the other side or engaging in a dialogue. It is absolute tyranny. This is a horseshoe political theory made manifest. Again, it says there's no interest in hearing the other side. At these kind of talks, he's the one with the podium. You know, he mentioned before, oh, we hear their side of the debate. This isn't really a debate. It's allowing someone who's already been proven to be talking shit to speak from the podium. You know, there's a reason why we don't, like I said, we don't have creationists or race realists or anyone like that giving talks at academic institutions, because they have not proven their arguments worthy of that kind of thing. That is why people are annoyed. And here we have it. It doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree with Warren Farrell. It doesn't matter if you think his ideas are good or bad, whether you think he walks on roses or throws puppies over overpasses, or whether you are convinced his concepts will help or hurt the world. Intellectual honesty means you do not censor speech. Sans, and it says in brackets, sans ad hominem attacks. Well, why? Why can't we? You know, if we're not censoring speech, what's so special about ad hominem attacks? I mean, according to this guy, you know, misogynistic bullshit, misogynic stuff that's been proven to be bullshit is fine, you know, because of free speech. But suddenly he's got some weird problem with ad hominem attacks. We don't censor ad hominem attacks either. If people want to make them, then, you know, they're just digging their own grave, really, aren't they? This is the problem, though. That's not really how intellectual honesty works. You know, we don't waste our time listening to people who build their arguments off false premises. You work to persuade your fellow citizens that your position is right based on reason and facts. You do not shut down their access to information. Again, these things have already been proven to be garbage. That's the point. They shouldn't be. This is what I keep saying. They shouldn't be at this level. We shouldn't be discussing them in an academic institution. This is for the internet. You know, you can splatter this bullshit all over the internet if you want. People can read it, realise it doesn't tessellate with facts, and they either then believe it anyway if they're that way inclined, or if they're sensible, they don't believe it. There's no reason to be giving these people a platform they don't deserve. These protesters just assured that several mental models are going to kick in that will ultimately help Warren Farrell. The forbidden fruit mental model, which causes people to want to know about and have access to what others are trying to keep them from discovering or enjoying, is powerful. The mere association mental model are going to result in people who are trying to attend the lecture out of curiosity, ascribing a range of violent, hateful, anti-intellectual traits to feminism in general, much to the movement's detriment. The reciprocity of mental model means that some people may take actions against these protesters, perhaps even covertly to undermine their cause as retaliation for the abuse they dished out to innocent passers-by. Well, it's possible, yeah, it may intrigue people to want to know what all the fuss is about. That doesn't necessarily play in Warren Farrell's favour. I didn't know who the fuck he was, and I do get kind of, you know, up until recently didn't know who the hell he was. I do get a bit nostalgic for the time I didn't know who he was, because, you know, the world seemed a lot less bleak then. Since I've learned who he was, I do despair for humanity a bit. And he goes on, it's a self-defeating way to behave. Were I the protesters, I would have set up a booth, served free oversized chocolate chip cookies with hot chocolate or cold milk in branded cups, leading to a website that had a series of videos refuting the specific points in the speech. As I handed each attendee their free dessert and food, triggering reciprocity, I would have smiled and gotten specific promises from people on a one-on-one basis to listen to our counter-arguments. My success rate would have been far higher. It's basic psychology. That's a very weird and dishonest way to protest, isn't it? Drawing people in with treats only to give them your political agenda. It's actually very dishonest to do that, what you're suggesting. It's also weird. It's also fucking weird. I can't imagine trying to promote my political agenda by giving people free food and then sort of sneaking some kind of website in with it. That's actually the action of religious evangelists. You know, they'll do that kind of thing. They sort of lure people in, you know, and then suddenly, bam, hit them with the message. You know, I'd rather they were upfront about it, to be honest. They're still annoying people, but at least they're upfront and honest about it. Now, my personal opinion of these protesters, I've watched the video. Yeah, there are some definite criticisms you could make with the way they're behaving. Unfortunately, protests tend to be like that. Protests are events that do have a habit of getting out of hand. Unfortunately, sometimes I think protesting is necessary. It would be nice if everyone could stay under control of these things and everyone could stay within the restraints of the law. The problem is doing something that's illegal at a protest. It's a very thin line between what's legal and what's illegal, and unfortunately people do have a tendency to cross it. Does it speak poorly of the feminist movement? I don't know, no more than it does of any other movement. I've seen protests from all kinds of movements, from socialist movements, animal rights movements, all kinds of different movements. You do see some poor behaviour occasionally. I think it's par the course. So I don't think it really speaks any worse. I'd say it doesn't speak any worse of the feminist movement, or this particular feminist movement, than it does of any other, really. So it's not above criticism, to put it that way, but the suggestions he's making here are weird. Now, the guy who forwarded me this article seems to think it's extremely fair. He said, he seems to think it's a very fair and balanced kind of article. I really don't think it is. I think this guy obviously has a bias toward Warren Farrell. He's trying to sound unbiased, but when you are biased, it's very difficult to do that. Because he goes on here to give a rather generous overview of Warren Farrell's book that he claims not to have read. So he says here, what Warren Farrell was discussing. This is besides the point of the post, but as an addendum that many of you are going to be curious as to what the controversy entailed. Really, if it's beside the point, I don't think you should bother putting it here. The thesis of Warren Farrell's speech was that men in the developed world, particularly the United States and Canada, are facing an unprecedented crisis in 5 key areas: education, jobs, emotional health, physical health and fatherlessness. He points out several facts that should come as no surprise to those who keep up with the economic posts on this site and elsewhere. For the first time in history, our sons and brothers in the United States will have less education than their fathers. The current societal hierarchy ignores the mental health of boys, as evidenced by the fact that the suicide risk for boys and girls are the same up through 10 years old. After that, when men begin being indoctrinated into the societal roles that are expected of them, suicide risk climbs 2 times relative to girls between 11 and 14, 4 times relative to girls between 15 and 19, and a staggering 5 to 6 times girls between 20 and 24 years old. Addiction to media, including video games and other interactive content driven by the information revolution, is disproportionately hurting men. Men in general spend 3 times the hours per week engrossed in these types of activities compared to women. For every 1 girl who drops out of high school in Canada, there are 2 boys who do the same. I could go on. The addiction to media thing is the weirdest thing I find about Warren Farrell's argument. So the fact that a lot of boys spend a lot of their time watching porn and playing video games doesn't really suggest to me that men are oppressed. It just tells me men like watching porn and playing video games, as do a lot of women. I don't see that as a sign of oppression, really, at all. I think if you do that too often, it means you're not spending enough time doing other things that you should be getting on with, but I really don't see this as a sign of gender oppression, I'm afraid. And again, the rules society has chosen for them, yeah, that's the patriarchal society has chosen for them. So this sort of anti-feminist angle that Warren Farrell has, like most MRA arguments, it just doesn't make any sense. So I'll put all this in the box. Farrell's argument appears to be based on the idea that modern society indoctrinates young boys into thinking they are disposable. For example, boys are taught their feelings don't matter and to hide them, don't cry. Again, because of patriarchy, not because of feminism. Goes on about drafting only men into war. Yes, again, men. That was a decision made by men, not by women. Certainly not by feminists. They're told the natural hobbies and interests, golf or boating, are a waste of time. How is golf a natural interest? What does that even mean? Golf is a artificially created activity. It's a sport that we made. We as a species made. It's not something we're naturally inclined towards doing. And even then, we tell both men and women, people of all areas of the gender spectrum, that their hobbies and interests are a waste of time. I don't know why we suddenly focus on that being a problem for men. Everyone's hobbies get ridiculed. So he gives this very, very generous overview of Warren Farrell's book, which apparently he hasn't read. So in conclusion he says, to decide whether you think Warren Farrell is controversial or not, here is a long list of his quotes. Read them and come to your own conclusions. If you are going to support or criticise his positions, you must be intellectually honest about it and read his books, to come to a fully formed decision about his facts and interpretation of those facts. I have not yet personally read any of Farrell's books, so I have no comment on them either way. No way, I don't believe you. However, I will buy some of his works and put them on the reading list so that I am better prepared to comment on them in the future. There's a reason why I would never read Warren Farrell's book. It's the same as, I would never read anything by Ray Comfort. He's written several books. I'm not going to read a book by Ray Comfort because it's a book built on false premises. If he thinks that evolution means a fish running in and out of the ocean trying to grow lungs, then I don't want to read his book. It's as simple as that. Anyone who builds their argument off of something like that, their argument is going to be wrong, no matter which direction they try and take it in. If that's the basis of it, it's bollocks. I don't need to listen to the rest of an argument like that. It's built off of a false premise. Warren Farrell is a rape apologist. If you're a rape apologist, I don't want to read your books. It's as simple as that. I might read the odd blog post you've put up, I might watch the odd YouTube video to find out just how disgusting of a rape apologist you are. I'm not reading a book. I'm not paying money to get hold of your book. I am not going to make you richer, make you into a richer rape apologist, just so I can definitely, absolutely, positively, definitely know that you're talking bullshit. I'm not going to give up hours of my life reading a book. I've seen the quotes from this book. I've seen the quote. The guy is a disgusting fucking rape apologist who has associations to a movement which is run by rape apologists. This guy has connections to Paul Elam, who thinks that women are begging to be raped. So no, I'm not going to read his book. It's not going to be ignorant that I'm not going to read his book, because his book is built off of false premises. I mean, if I were going to critique it, if I was some sort of feminist critic, if I was going to pull the thing apart, obviously I'd read it, I'd pick it apart bit by bit by bit, but that's not not my job to do that. So no, we don't need to read his book to know he's an asshole. And again, despite the fact this guy is supposedly neutral on this, he says, if you're interested in the war against boys, here is a speech by author Christina Hoff Sommers, who discusses in depth the failure of the institutions to prepare males for the changes in the modern world. It's an interesting speech if you are a student of sociology, and in the case of many people on this site, how cultural and demographic shifts will ultimately influence the economy. Her most powerful assertion is that the education system is increasingly run by women for girls, and the attempt to turn boys into girls is a system of oppression. So this guy isn't really very neutral on this issue, is he? He clearly has an MRA bias. And, oh my goodness, the modern world is the way it is because of patriarchy. All the positive changes in terms of gender equality have come from feminism. Okay, people keep on telling me that feminists have never done anything for men. I mean, yes, they have. Paternity leave, work safety. These all come from feminism. Okay? Do you know who has definitely never done anything for men's rights? Right? The fucking men's rights movement. They've never done a fucking thing. Not one. Not a single fucking thing. All they do is dick about on the internet, insulting people, posting hate comments to people, sending rape threats to people, writing stupid, pointless blogs about how women are begging to be raped. And that's it. Or the brilliant one, sending false rape accusations to the college authorities. Yeah, you've got to love that one, haven't you? The group of people who complain consistently about women falsely accusing men of rape and how false rape accusations are this big problem that they're against, decide to send a load of false rape accusations themselves. Absolute idiots. Anyway, let me know what you think. Goodbye.